Decision 2018, the 9th Congressional District of Pennsylvania political debate, is presented by the Schuylkill County Chamber of Commerce and the Pottsville Area School District. Tonight's live broadcast is brought to you by MadhousenProductions.com, the area's most recommended video and photography services. To have us video your event, please call 570-544-3136 or check the link below to get a DVD or a USB copy of this debate. The views expressed in this live broadcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of MHP. Now let's go live to the debate hall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Zweibel, Superintendent of the Pottsville Area School District, and it is my pleasure to welcome you this evening to the DHH Langle Middle School Auditorium for tonight's 9th Congressional District Candidates Forum. The Pottsville Area School District is proud to be able to partner with the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce on this event in order to offer it to our public. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce the moderator for the forum this evening, the President and CEO of the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Bob Carl.
Thank you, Dr. Zweibel. And good evening, everyone. My name is Bob Carl, and I'm the President and CEO of the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce is very proud to be the sponsor of tonight's 9th Congressional District Candidates Forum. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce's mission statement reads that the Chamber is dedicated to serving its members and affiliates with value-added programs and services and improving the quality of life and economic vitality of our county. Now celebrating our 100th anniversary this year, the Schuylkill Chamber has pursued a vision of greater potential and increased opportunity for Schuylkill County. The Chamber carries out our mission through advocacy, leadership development, member networking, education, marketing, and advertising for our businesses and nonprofit members. Our member support of the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce assists us in representing the interests of business both individually and collectively in order to create a strong economy through job creation and workforce development in order to create and maintain a strong and growing economy and a quality of life for all of our citizens residing in and around the Schuylkill County region. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce, through our Government Affairs Committee, takes government advocacy and constituent education extremely seriously. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce does not promote or endorse political candidates. What we do is provide opportunities such as tonight for Chamber members and the public to understand candidates' platforms and for elected officials to have their track records monitored and benchmarked to the legislative agenda and priorities set annually by the Government Affairs Committee on behalf of the Chamber. We live in a democracy where we rely on strong representation, and the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce is proud to work with our elected officials and to have our businesses, nonprofits, and citizens' voices heard. The legislative agenda of the Schuylkill Chamber is simple and straightforward: to advocate for our members, including businesses, nonprofit organizations, municipalities, all representing our citizens regarding priorities that can assist to improve the American economy and create jobs. The advocacy track record of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, and the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce, who work together in collaboration and partnership in advocating on issues, is strong in defending business and supporting free enterprise. The importance of this election cycle affects us all. Whether it is concern over taxes or healthcare reform, increased costs, and unreasonable mandates, all create a heavy burden on businesses and organizations, causing uncertainty, which causes job regression and not job creation. In carrying out its mission, the Chamber advocates for appropriate legislative decisions that will support business, job growth, improve economic vitality, and therefore the quality of life for all of us. Tonight, each candidate will get to address the issues selected for this candidates forum. They have known the topics in advance for a while. They have not seen the questions, however, until they hear them tonight. We ask you to listen very carefully, and most importantly, the following. We ask you to respect their responses and whether you agree or you disagree, remain silent during and following their responses. Your sincere respect of the candidacies and their responses will allow us to assure you learn the most about them in approximately the next 90 minutes. We do remind you that this is a public event. Members of the media are present and will be recording some or all of this candidate's forum. Portions of or all of this forum may be recorded and played back on television and or streamed live and or on radio and reported on in various newspapers, other print media, or social media. Because it is a public forum, there have been no restrictions imposed on anyone, including the public, from recording any portion of the forum. However, the importance of social and professional decorum will be honored and maintained. Should I, as the moderator, believe at any time that social and professional decorum is not being achieved, we reserve the right to stop the event and ask for those not abiding to provide common courtesy deserved by the candidates, or to be asked to leave the auditorium by security, or for me to just stop the forum. Thank you for caring enough about the issues facing our nation to attend and listen to the positions of our candidates so that you can make a well-informed decision on who should represent us into the future. We have a unique opportunity this year in this upcoming election cycle. We will elect a new congressional representative. Please sit back and quietly observe and learn about the key positions they stand for so that you can make an informed, intelligent choice in the November 6th general election. Please join me and let us begin by pledging the flag to my right here, and let's pledge allegiance to our great country and our American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and you may be seated. There has been an order established by a coin flip tonight. Denny Wolff won the coin flip and has chosen to open with the first opening statement. Dan Meuser will follow. We will then go through the series of topics and questions. Their order to answer those questions will flip-flop as well. And then we will do closing statements, which will be first by Dan Meuser and then followed by Denny Wolff, again according to the coin flip backstage. So at this point, I would like to begin with the opening statement. I'd first like to welcome both candidates, Denny Wolff and Dan Meuser. They've been very courteous and very cooperative with the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce and been very present in Schuylkill County, something important to all of us. So I welcome you both, gentlemen. I look forward to a lively discussion, and the first opening statement will be offered by Democratic candidate Denny Wolff.
Thank you. It's great to be here this evening. It's always a pleasure to be in Schuylkill County, and especially Pottsville. I know you have a rich history here of both mining and agriculture, and I also know it's the home of the 1925 NFL champion Maroons. So I know that's near and dear to the people that live here in the great city of Pottsville. I'm a dairy farmer. I was born and raised on the farm. I farm today. My wife Josie and I have 150 registered Holsteins. I was able to get off the farm a few times. I served as Pennsylvania's Secretary of Agriculture, where I put in place a couple of programs you may have heard of, Pennsylvania Preferred and also the Center for Dairy Excellence. I served on the WTO under both the Clinton and the Bush administrations, where I represented the United States at the WTO rounds in Hong Kong in 2007. And I've had the privilege of serving as president of Camp Victory from its inception over 30 years ago. I'd like to say that you couldn't have two more different candidates running for Pennsylvania's 9th Congressional District. One moved here from Long Island, lives in the 8th Congressional District, still owns 2 homes in New York, has 3 in Pennsylvania, has bought a new home every time he's run for Congress here in Pennsylvania. He has a Mercedes, a Porsche, an Audi, several other cars, a boat in the Hamptons, and a couple airplanes. I'm a dairy farmer. I'm farming the same ground that my dad and my granddad farmed. I drive a Ford F-250 to work. It's got a few dents in it. I wear Carhartts, and I take my vacation the first day of deer season every year. I still hunt with the same gun that I bought when I was 14 years old, with premiums that I won at the Williamsburg Fair, showing my 4-H heifers. I'm running for Congress because I think Congress has forgotten what made this country great, who built this country. It's the working families. I think they need a seat at the table. My goal is to represent the people of the 9th Congressional District. My opponent wants to be a member of Congress. There's a big difference there. Thank you.
Thank you, Denny. And now the opening statement by Republican candidate Dan Meuser. Dan?
Well, thanks, everyone. It's really nice being here. Schuylkill has become a second home, certainly here in Pottsville as well. I do want to thank the Chamber. I want to thank all of Schuylkill County, all the friends, all the people that I've met along the way, all the endorsements we've received, Senator Argold, Representative Tobash, Representative Jerry Knowles, the commissioners, the row officers. It's been a great embrace, and you've made a great difference in this campaign, which I'm proud of, and we will continue to make Pottsville the center of the 9th District, and the 9th District will be part of keeping America great. I can assure you that. My background growing up, my father was a police officer. We grew up in a very middle-class household. My mom went to work when we went to school. My father at one time heard me say we were in a middle-class household growing up, and he leaned over to me and said, "Hey, Dan, we were lower middle class. But you know what? They gave me everything they possibly could, and I wouldn't change any of it." I have lived in Pennsylvania, in Luzerne County, for over 30 years now. My wife and I, who's here with me tonight, of 28 years, raised our children here. I have a daughter that's 25, 20, and a boy that's 16 that goes to Dallas High School. During this time frame, I helped build a business. Started a very small business back in 1988. It is now a pretty large business, employing over 750 people, very high-paying jobs. We make an absolute wonderful products of mobility that provide independence and freedom to countless people throughout the Commonwealth, our country, and the world. It is a great company, and it is named one of the best places to work consistently. I also served as a Secretary of Revenue for 4 years under Governor Tom Corbett. During that time, we set out with a mission to transform the department, to truly make it great, for it to work for the people. We were successful. We treated taxpayers like customers. We implemented business practices, and we were named the most improved Department of Revenue in the country during my tenure there. I'm running for Congress now for all the right reasons, folks. I am very interested in supporting the President's America First agenda. I am about moving our country forward, not dragging us down, and I will be a problem solver here at home.
Thank you, Dan. And now we'll go to the questions. There will be a series of 8 questions. The first topic we've chosen for tonight is the economy and tariffs. After I read the opening and frame the topic, candidate Dan Meuser will answer first, and Denny Wolff will be given equal time to follow. So on the economy and tariffs, the most recent 2 years have seen some of the most sustained economic performance in decades and the lowest unemployment rate in a very long time. Some say the economy has never performed as well in their lifetime. Consumer confidence is high, and the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce members have expressed growth and confidence in their ability to add jobs. If there is a problem, it seems to be finding qualified workers to fill the jobs this growth has created. On the other hand, President Trump's approach to improving trade, specifically imposing tariffs as part of his trade negotiation strategy, has been viewed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and some businesses with mixed emotions and sometimes skepticism. The recent approval of the USMCA package, the package that replaced previously known as NAFTA with a modernized agreement with Mexico and Canada, seems to have stabilized some of the trade concerns with those 2 countries. However, the continued giant concern seems to be the potential of a serious trade war with China and escalating tariffs on both sides. Many believe that continued tariffs could lead to a destructive trade war and very serious consequences for long-term U.S. economic growth and job creation. Particular concerns remain on imports of steel and aluminum and other supply chains for American manufacturers from outside the United States. Please provide your view of the current economic and trade outlook and your opinion of trade and the tariff negotiation approach undertaken by President Trump. Are we on the right track or the wrong track? Can you support the Trump administration direction on economic growth and specifically trade negotiations through tariffs? And if not, what would your position be regarding stimulating the economy, supporting American businesses, and improving the trade imbalance? Again, the first crack at this goes to Dan Meuser.
Okay, Bob, thanks. Well, certainly we are on a phenomenal track. Think where we were 2 years ago. Unemployment was far higher. Our deficits were, we spent $10 trillion over an 8-year period under the Obama administration with basically nothing to show for it. And we were really going nowhere with an uninspired country. We now are in a position just 2 years later where we have some of the best economic indicators that we have seen since 1969. We've got unemployment as low as it's ever been, 3.7%, as low as it was in 1969. Manufacturing optimism is as good as it was since 1984. There's some really important good things happening. Wages are going up. Every sector of the economy virtually is doing very well. And this, folks, is because President Trump went in and laid out a plan, and he was able to get the Republicans in Congress behind him to enact the Tax and Jobs Act and to initiate regulatory reform. Not one Democrat, okay, and let me rephrase that, not one Pelosi Washington Democrat voted for the president's plan. And the reason I clarify that is because we know a lot of good local Democrats, but in Washington, folks, they all vote along with the leadership. It's all about Nancy Pelosi, it's also about Chuck Schumer, and it's all about doing anything to stand in the way of what the president's trying to do and making America as great as it can be for as many people as possible. And come on, you have to look at the results. That's what we're trying to do here. Low taxes, regulatory reform, repeal and replace Obamacare in the right manner. You know, you go around the district, people are suffering. People are suffering because of Obamacare. They're paying $2,500 a month with deductibles of $6,000, $7,000 a month. My opponent thinks Obamacare is terrific. The people of the 9th District do not agree. Regarding tariffs, look, America's been pushed around for a long time. Since 1945 with the EU, we've had dairy tariffs, virtually trade barriers with Canada of 200% that nobody's done anything about. And it's about time that we do. The president stepped in and said, hey, these things need to be corrected. We need reciprocity. We need fairness. We need free, fair, and reciprocal. And they said, no, we like keeping things at the status quo. And the president said, well, guess what? The status quo, we're now going to apply the same. We're going to make the type of tariffs you have on us reciprocal to you. And that sent a few shudders for, a couple of month period. Now, Mexico and Canada has already come to the table. The EU has come to the table. The Pacific Rim is coming to the table, and we're working on China. Look, we've got to do what's right for the right reasons. America is supposed to be the land of opportunity, of entrepreneurs, of the growth of small business, and of freedom in our economy. We can do this as long as people take the politics out of it and truly are about doing what's best for the people. And the liberal Democrats are not part of this at this time. That's why it's so important that we win this midterm election.
Thank you, Dan. Denny?
Yeah, the economy is doing great. You can't really say that it isn't when you look at the stock market until this week, how the stock market was doing. Look, the lending of the financial institutions last quarter, they had a record profit. They made $60 billion. The people that work on Wall Street last year, their wages increased 13%. They're now making $422,000 a year. But I'll tell you what, the economic boom hasn't found its way here yet. Maybe it has up in the 8th Congressional District where Dan lives, but it sure as heck hasn't found it here to the 9th Congressional District where I live. I hear family and people talking about their challenges. They're worried about how they're going to pay their bills. They sit around the kitchen table trying to figure out whether they have enough money to pay their bills for the month, let alone think about putting some money in the stock market. Look, I don't want to just stand here and complain about these issues. There's things we need to do to make the economy better here in the 9th. We need to do things like making sure that we have our next generation graduating from career and technical schools with the skills that they need to take advantage of the skilled jobs that are out there, phenomenal amount of jobs out there, good paying jobs, no one to fill them, or retraining the current workforce to be able to take care of that and be able to fill those jobs and earn more for their families. You know, the average median income in the United States increased 1.8% last year. You know what inflation was? 2.1. That's a negative. They didn't make out quite as good as the people on Wall Street did. That's one of the problems I have with the economy today. Look, I've spent my whole life exporting dairy products, and I've exported cattle all over the world. I understand how important the world market is to our farmers and our ag community here in Pennsylvania. It is extremely important. Trade agreements are good. Tariffs are bad. Let's not get them mixed up, because trade agreements help farmers, they help small businesses, they help industry. They basically lay out the framework for how they can export products, and the WTO works as an organization that governs that and polices that. I think NAFTA should have been renegotiated. I think that was a good idea. I think that there's some good things in there, and now hopefully we can implement that as we go forward. China's a different story. As far as I'm concerned, we are where we are. We have to deal with China. We're going to need to resolve that. It's not going to go away. We need to get Wilbur Ross on a plane, send him over there, and have him figure it out. Because I'll tell you what, there's farm families today trying to figure out what they're going to do next month. They're trying to figure if they're going to sell their dairy herds. We have farmers that sold their soybeans for less than $8 a bushel because of the embargo or the trade tariffs with China, and they're not able to pay off their operating notes. So there's some problems out there that need to be solved. Access to markets and the next generation being career ready when they graduate, they're what this district needs and what we need to move it forward.
Thank you, Denny. Topic number 2, Social Security. Something that I never thought I'd be that keenly interested in, but now find myself very interested. The Social Security system is in trouble, and projections indicate that by the year 2034, it will be insolvent as it now stands. There has been some speculation that to adjust for those eventual shortfalls, changes need to be made. Social Security recipients might have their benefits decreased by as much as 20% by some estimates, on or sometime shortly after that year if significant changes are not made. Congress continues to recognize the actuarial reality of this situation, and yet many in Congress say it will be resolved, but really have no specific plan that they have stated. Couple the Social Security concern with the growing percentage of entitlement programs as a percentage of the national budget, things like Medicare, Medicaid, etc., and it appears we are on a course for some type of crash landing fiscally. Schuylkill County has a very significant elderly population, and many of the baby boomers, my generation, are on the verge of retirement and now becoming Social Security eligible. Pennsylvania has a higher than average state elderly population, so this issue is not only important here in the 9th Congressional District, but across Pennsylvania. Should Social Security, gentlemen, as we know it today, continue? Is Social Security reform needed? Is there a better model for Social Security type assistance in the future? What would be your specific plan that you would either propose or that you could support if elected to Congress? How would that plan work, and what amount of funding would be generated by the plan to make Social Security or a similar benefit solvent for the long term? And this question is going to be first answered by Denny Wolff.
Look, Social Security needs protected at all costs. I traveled around the district and met with a number of senior citizens. Many of them, that is their sole income. They are very concerned about it, as well they should be. They read the newspapers, they hear the news, they know that by 2034, the Social Security Trust Fund is going to be depleted. That means they're going to take a 20% hit on the Social Security check that they receive every month, the Social Security check that they depend on. It needs to be funded. I suggest that we fund it by raising the wage cap from $128,000 to $350,000. That generates additional revenue. That additional revenue keeps the Social Security fund intact and healthy for most of this decade. At risk, excuse me, okay, I'm sorry. At risk, there is 40% of the federal budget that is allocated to Social Security. And when you have a $21 trillion deficit, that makes it a target. So we need to make sure that we protect it at all costs. It needs to be fully funded, it needs to be hands-off, and as Washington and Congress start deciding how they're going to look for and find new money because of decisions like they made with the tax bill last December that's going to add $1.5 trillion to our deficit, we need to make sure that it is protected, make sure that our senior citizens are able to get their Social Security check every month. That is just critical and important. Look, I know there's some ideas and thoughts out there. I know my opponent has some ideas. He's talked about everything's on the table as to what we do with Social Security. I just hope that he doesn't move forward with it like when he was Secretary of Revenue and he decided that they should privatize the lottery program that's important to senior citizens in this state. It funds PACE, PACENet, other senior programs. They spent over $3 million trying to put that package together. It was bid on by a UK company, and it was so unpopular that the governor wouldn't sign it into law. So we certainly don't need to talk about privatizing Social Security like they were talking about privatizing the lottery system that would have affected seniors in Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Denny. Dan Meuser.
All right, folks, there's a lot of lies being told here tonight. I thought maybe I would just keep a list and then address them. So instead, what we're going to do is my team's going to keep it together. And if you give us your email afterwards, we will send you the truth tomorrow. I'm up to about 7 or 8 already, so I don't have enough ink in my pen. You're really, really not a good person. This whole thing about, sorry, it's the best way I could say it. The lottery, all right, we'll talk about Social Security. You know, it's dangerous when he talks about things that he doesn't know what he's talking about. All right, that was an opportunity to raise hundreds of millions of dollars. There was no sale. Maybe he knows that, maybe he doesn't. But that's all nonsense. It was bringing in a sales manager team that would guarantee with funds available that you could pull from escrow in order to assure certain rates of growth that never existed before. It would have been a great program. It would have brought in $350 million easily for seniors, and nothing would have been sold at all. We need to be creative with our government, just like you are in the private sector. And this was a creative plan, and doing anything that he said would have been against state law and federal law. So it could never possibly happen. And Kathleen Kane, by the way, who's on her way to jail, who he's a supporter of, she's the one who stopped it from occurring for strictly political purposes. Birds of a feather flock together. Social Security. Let's talk about things that are actually important. All right, at this point, something that we can do about it. Social Security is one of the only funds that people have paid into, 6.2%, with an employer match, 12.4% over a 40-year period. All right, that adds up for a salary between $55,000 to $65,000 of somewhere in the neighborhood of a $300,000 nest egg with growth. Social Security is the one area of our government that we should not even consider touching, nor will I, on my watch, will it be touched. It should be sustained, and people should have no concern as to whether or not their Social Security, what they pay into, won't be there afterwards. My opponent just brought up the idea of raising the cap. Well, liberals always want to raise taxes in order to solve a problem. That would raise 6.2%. Above, I believe it's $125,000 income. So employers would keep people at $125,000 so they wouldn't have to continue to pay. There's always unintended results and consequences when liberals start dabbling with our economy. That's not a good idea at all. What we need to do, the best way of securing our Social Security is through economic growth and jobs. The more jobs that we create, the more taxpayers there are, the more taxes will fill the system, and Social Security will be solvent come 1932, 1933.
Thank you, Dan.
For DVD and USB copies of tonight's live broadcast with no commercial interruption, please go to madhousenproductions.com/TV or check the link in the description box below. To have us video your event, please call 570-544-3136. Now let's go back to the debate hall.
Topic number 3, infrastructure. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce, through the great work of our Transportation Committee, has been on the forefront of infrastructure advocacy for decades. Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce played a significant role both locally and in the state in conjunction with the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry in advocating for the first significant transportation legislation reform in Pennsylvania in 3 decades, resulting in Act 89 of 2013. The current Chamber advocacy focuses on national infrastructure modernization, with our advocacy partner being the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Key elements that are being discussed include more funding at the federal level, public-private partnerships, reform of permitting and regulation improvements, and workforce development enhancements. In the past 25 years, this issue has not been addressed nationally. Vehicles today are significantly more fuel efficient. Motorists use less fuel to drive the same number of miles, and there is significantly less revenue to maintain the roads and bridges they drive on. Pennsylvania has many more road miles than many states, with a climate of greater variations in temperature and weather conditions, both greatly impacting Pennsylvania's ability to maintain our roads and bridges. Infrastructure concerns for economic growth enhancements are not just limited to transportation, but include such things as broadband service, water treatment, waste management, sewerage, groundwater runoff, and the development of schools and school systems. Therefore, the infrastructure conversation is generally very broad, expensive, yet critical to our future economy. Please describe your view of infrastructure and the importance of same to the U.S. and Pennsylvania's specific interests when competing for economic growth with other states. Is infrastructure a top priority for you to advocate for Pennsylvania in relationship and in comparison to other states? The first answer goes to Dan Meuser.
Yes, extremely important. Infrastructure and transportation is a core function of government. We are the Keystone State. We actually have more state roads in Pennsylvania than all of New York and all of New England combined. Our transportation needs, our shipping needs, our distribution needs here in Pennsylvania are enormously important. They're important in any state, but even more so here. I believe that we should get, and we will get, a federal bill, transportation infrastructure bill. I spent a fair amount of time with those on the committee, the T&I committee, the Transportation Infrastructure Committee in Congress, including Bill Schuster and Lou Barletta. Seeing that the both of them won't be in Congress next year, Lou Barletta will be in the U.S. Senate. I'm doing my best to make sure that I can get on the Transportation Infrastructure Bill Committee, so as, should this bill pass, which we will certainly work towards, I can be involved in helping manage it for the all-important Keystone State. We have a long way to go. We've really fallen behind in our country. We've fallen behind here in Pennsylvania, not just with upkeep and keeping our roads safe and keeping our potholes filled, but in modernization. So we need to be smart about it. We are running deficits, as I think everyone knows, so we need some smart people to think out of the box and come up with ways to bring the public-private sector into this, public-private partnerships including. So I look forward to being part of developing a plan. It is certainly a core function of government, and I definitely think we will see it should we keep the House within the next 2 years.
Thank you, Denny.
Well, there's no question our infrastructure is crumbling. Anyone that makes the trip down Route 61 from Frackville to Pottsville knows exactly what I'm talking about. The roads are really tough. They don't seem to be able to keep them up to date. It's interesting. Someone asked me today, how comes we're building a new road like the corridor that comes off of Route US 15 North coming into Winfield? Why are we building that when we can't maintain our current roads? Kind of an interesting discussion. There's certainly no question that as a farmer, I understand how important infrastructure is. I mean, it started way back in day one when farmers were getting their products to market. It's critical to have good roads, bridges, where you don't have to go 25 miles out of your way to go avoid a bridge that doesn't have the right weight limit on it for your trucks. And the ports where we export them, it all fits together. It's about our economy. It is a huge part about how we export products and how our economy operates here. So we need to address it, we need to deal with it, we need to invest in it. It's also good for the economy. Every $1 billion you invest in infrastructure, it generates about $1.4 billion in economic returns. I want to talk about something a little bit different than roads and bridges, which gets most of the discussion on infrastructure. It's called broadband. Broadband is a real problem in the 9th Congressional District. There's areas that does not have cell service. There's many people that do not have broadband access. And I know, for example, this year there was dollars that were made available from the FCC that would come into Pennsylvania. It should have been utilized by Verizon. They took a pass on it, so the money was not used. So broadband was not expanded as it should have been because of the federal funds that were available that were not utilized. I think one of the things that we need to do is look at how private companies may be able to access those dollars, maybe grants for specific individuals, businesses, schools, hospitals that need to run a broadband line from the nearest point to their facility. We need to be creative and think about that. But it's a real problem, and it doesn't appear like Verizon is going to help us solve the problem here in Pennsylvania. Broadband's the #1 issue I have in terms of infrastructure.
Thank you, Denny. Topic number 4, and a sad one at that, opioid and heroin crisis. The United States continues to be in the midst of a national crisis of drug abuse, and many individuals are suffering from opioid addiction. Many times these addictions are acquired from the use of prescription medications legally prescribed by physicians. Too many times they eventually evolve to heroin use as a less expensive way to maintain their addicted habits. This is of particular concern in the business community related to hiring workers. Sometimes these addictions develop as an outcome of workers' compensation, work-related injury treatment. President Trump and Governor Wolff have both declared the opioid epidemic as a national public and statewide public health emergency that has been stated that needs to be done, have much more done. The supply of opioid medications being prescribed continues to be alarming, with many examples of physicians prescribing numbers that are staggering and difficult to believe. The recent Pennsylvania legislation initiative creating the mandated pharmacist drug monitoring systems and the related responsibility of tracking prescribing have assisted in physician prescribing crackdown and physician shopping by patients seeking physicians who have created these opiate prescribing mills. However, we have fallen short in Pennsylvania as well in failing to obtain Senate Bill 936, which was legislation created that would have created a medication formulary for workers' compensation cases, limiting the use of these dangerous opioid narcotics, similar to the legislation that's already been passed in very aggressive states such as California, New York, and Ohio, where these type of formulary reforms have been successfully legislated and achieved significant statistical results. In Pennsylvania, our business desire for this legislation fell short when the governor failed to sign the legislation. This underachievement affects our business community and our employees because there is significant evidence that these dangerous and overprescribed narcotics are no more effective in relieving pain and long-term work-related recovery than much safer medications with far less addictive potential. Another problem is the illegal influx of fentanyl, other synthetic opioid derivatives, and heroin across our international borders, especially Mexico, Central America, South America, and from other countries like China, and through many other ports of entry, including internet sales. The resulting impact is too many addicted individuals, depleting the potential of our workforce and making far too many unemployable individuals because they either cannot pass a pre-employment drug test or physically function every day in today's society to be able to maintain employment. What specific actions in the war against drugs do you support? Is this a state-by-state issue, or is a more aggressive national effort needed? And please specify what you as an elected congressman would do to assist in fighting this epidemic and preserving the future of many of our youth. And this question first goes to Denny Wolff.
Right. I read an article today that said opioids is the crisis next door, and how true that is. 115 people die every day from overdoses of opioids, and more specifically fentanyl in many cases. It's a real problem here in Schuylkill County. It's a real problem in every county in the 9th Congressional District. And I want to congratulate President Trump for signing his bill, the Support for Patients and Communities Act. It is something that went through Congress. It's going to make funding available. It has many different parts to it, from prevention, treatment, and also working to keep fentanyl out of the United States, which was one of the things that you mentioned. It's very important and it is critical. Look, it comes down to basic components. It's education, early intervention, making sure that kids in grade school and the secondary school system are aware of what the risks are. Lay the facts out. Let them know that how this is destroying families and people are dying from it. Prescription drugs, no question about it. Talk to the local doctors. They're doing a good job, I think, in terms of changing the way they prescribe drugs, both in terms of the volume of drugs that they prescribe. They're switching back to a 7-day prescription, and they're only using opioids as the last resort. They're using other methods, other drugs that are used to manage pain. Narcan, something that saves a lot of lives. No question our first responders have to have that available, and making sure that that is available and it is co-paid by federal and state dollars to make sure that it doesn't break local budgets. Detox centers, treatment centers, real issue and challenge in rural areas like the 9th Congressional District. I think the detox center and treatment centers are fairly, maybe they're at capacity, but where we're really lacking is the long-term treatment and recovery services that we need. Because once people go through this program, they need to be rehabilitated and introduced back into society so that they can get a job and start to live a normal life again. You know, I know one of the things that I heard so many times in talking to the different people as they talked about opioids and the challenges and the problems is the program that was something I hadn't heard about before. It's called the Warm Handoff Program. It talks about how law enforcement deals with people that have overdosed, where instead of putting them in jail, they try to get them into a rehab facility. Addiction is a real problem. It's a real disease. Jail doesn't solve that problem. So I think that program has been doing well. It is important. We need to continue it. So federal dollars are flowing. They're flowing to the state. The state administers it. I think they've got good programs in place that are working on it, but we certainly need to continue our effort because there is children that are out there that are addicted. There's people dying every day from opioid addiction, and we need to stop that.
Dan Meuser.
It is a very serious issue affecting all sectors of our community. I, like many, know good friends who've lost young children, middle-aged children, older people in the area to opioids, and then a couple of cases because of the heroin. There's a lot of personal experiences out there. Here in Schuylkill County, we already have exceeded last year's number of deaths. I was with Dr. David Moylan just the other day, who I plan on working hand in hand with him on this issue. And we're now at, unfortunately, 63 deaths in Schuylkill County. Well, last year it was 51. So the problem's not getting better, folks. It's getting worse. Yes, we did just pass a bill, a federal bill that the president has signed. The House passed it in June. The Senate recently passed it, so the president just signed it a couple of days ago, providing a number of requirements for doctors for prescribing opioids, minimal levels as opposed to providing 60, providing smaller amounts, keeping fentanyl from coming in from overseas, from post office and other shipping means, and more work on the border, having agents understand what the difference between fentanyls and heroin. It's another reason, obviously, for border security. And there was money for recovery, which is very, very important because there's a lot of stress put on preventive means here, and that's taking place. Of course, that's important. But we also need more engagement in the warm handoffs, and once that occurs at the hospitals, that we assure that people have a bed to go to. So we need to make some breakthroughs there. last year or 2 years ago, the data I don't have for last year, there were 450 million opioids prescribed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for 13.5 million people. That's 37 pills a person. So the overprescriptions there are alarming, but now that the levels of opioids are coming down, people are going to heroin, sadly, and very often the heroin is actually laced with fentanyl, which is a death sentence. So there's a number of groups, even locally, alive today. For instance, Corey McCabe. I've been spending a lot of time with him here in Pottsville and for all of Schuylkill County, raising drug awareness, attending events. We spoke up at the Mahanoy area high school, making a riveting, compelling case for why kids got to stay away from this very dangerous situation. So, we need a member of Congress who gets it, who will be readily available, that knows how to problem solve, knows how to get things done, and isn't just in Washington pontificating over bigger issues and going through the motions, but someone who's going to be very active here at home, and I vow to do that.
Thank you, Dan. So we've kind of warmed up with the first 4 questions, and I can guarantee you these last 4 are topics that everyone in our country and everyone in this room are keenly interested in. The number 5 topic is taxes. One of the most popular political debates is the role of tax cuts in stimulating economic growth. The first concern is always, how do you implement tax cuts, decrease revenue on the front end, and presume the result will be more revenue, money through spending into a stimulated economy on the back end? Another concern is where, how, and how much tax cutting do you implement? Is tax cutting a pure economic strategy with proven results, or is the strategy filled with fallacy and long-term economic consequences? President Trump, as we know, ran and implemented a tax cut via the congressional legislation, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, in December 2017, which appears to have significantly stimulated the economy. This was the first major overhaul of the tax code in a long time. The impacts include more competitive tax rates for all businesses, allowing businesses to immediately deduct the cost of new investments in the year purchased, and the ability of job creators to send less of their money to Washington, D.C., while expanding investments in buildings, tools, computers, employees, and communities. Many small businesses are more optimistic today in the strength of the U.S. economy due to the tax reform, and many individuals feel that economic optimism is at an all-time high. There are many reports of more people being hired. New investment is in capital equipment, bigger take-home paychecks, and greater investments in the workforce, including personal and professional development. There are other skeptics, however, who have called these initiatives crumbs and point to the impact of tax cuts in raising the national debt, something of very legitimate concern. This debate is important because there has been very recent talk of the possibility of what is now being called Tax Cut 2.0, better defined by President Trump in the last week as a 10% personal tax cut designed at further assisting the middle class as per his description. That initiative, if attempted, might impact the winner of this congressional seat as a newly elected member of Congress, or might be outcomes needing to be addressed as the Congress changes and carries over into the new session. So I ask you both, where do you stand on tax cuts? What is your assessment of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that has already been implemented and the impact to the business community and their workers? Would you support another tax cut, specifically a personal tax cut designed to help the middle class? And what is your perspective in general on tax cuts and the concern that many have related to mounting national debt? The first response goes to Dan Meuser.
Well, I haven't met one head of a household or working Pennsylvanian in the 9th District or one business owner that wishes taxes were higher, that they feel that they should be paying more to Harrisburg or more to the federal government. I know many small business owners, when the Tax and Jobs Act was passed, that said to me, you know something, I've done the math and I can hire one more person. I know many that have said, I can give raises, I can pay my people more, I can do more, I can reinvest more in my business. Folks, that's what happens. You know, liberals don't believe in tax cuts at all. Okay, liberals believe that taxes should be high and they should hand out the money selectively to where they know best it should go. Republicans believe that money in your pockets, you know how to spend best, and that certainly, of course, will drive your own personal consumer spending, and lo and behold, as we've noticed over the last year, completely drive the economy. I was completely for the Tax Act. Not one Democrat in Congress voted for the Tax Act that reduced many people's taxes by $2,000, families throughout the 9th Congressional. It also changed the inheritance tax so many family farms now are not in fear that they will have to pay a very high inheritance tax, which is 50%, upon the death of an owner of a farm. So these are things that tax delivers freedom, tax delivers money, tax cuts drive the economy. You know, when I was Revenue Secretary, we passed a tax policy, and it worked out very well. Capital stock and franchise tax and a number of taxes. And we primarily had Republican support. We had some Democrat support, but it certainly put us in a much more competitive place throughout the 50 states. In fact, it even moved Pennsylvania's economy up from 43rd, 44th in the rating systems down to about 32. Now, after 4 years of Tom Wolff, 3 years of Tom Wolff, almost four, we're back in the 45 range. So competitive tax rates are essential. Regarding the deficit that we deal with, look, we do not have a revenue problem in the Commonwealth or where I'm going to be working on the federal level, right? We have a spending problem. Revenues are going up 2.5% right now. That's a good amount. Any state, any thriving state, any good economy, 2.5% is good. The problem is our spending is going up 4%. So we truly have a 1.5% problem that needs to be dealt with, and any business owner in the room knows if your biggest problem is to cut 1.5% in overhead next year, you know you could do it. We do 2%, we start reducing the deficit.
Thank you, Dan. We go to Denny.
Well, let me tell you, any business owner in the room also knows you can't borrow your way out of debt. And when I see a $21 trillion debt on this country, it bothers me. I get called a liberal all the time by my opponent, but I think I'm the most conservative candidate running in this race. That really bothers me. I have grandchildren. That issue has to be dealt with. And when you pass a tax bill like we passed last December, that's going to add $1.5 trillion to the debt, that's a problem for me. I do not think that's a good idea, especially when you look at the fairness of the tax bill from 2017. I think middle class were not treated fairly. I don't think they got a fair shake. When the upper 1% gets a $54,000 tax break and the middle class America gets a couple $1,000s, you got to be kidding me. That is not fair. So I'm all about a tax break for the middle class. I think we need to take a second look at how that upper class, the upper part of the income bracket is taxed. I think it becomes very obvious that's a definite reflection of the members of Congress today. I think that's why we need people in Congress that work for a living, people that know what the value of a dollar is, and people know that you have to have a balanced budget.
For DVD and USB copies of tonight's live broadcast with no commercial interruption, please go to madhousenproductions.com/TV or check the link in the description box below. To have us video your event, please call 570-544-3136. Now let's go back to the debate hall.
Okay, well, we're going to go to the next question, question number 6, and it'll be a continuation of this same theme, so you'll have time to think about this a little more, and it is concerning the national debt. So, continuation. The Congressional Budget Office confirmed that trillion-dollar budget deficits are on the horizon. If Congress extends various expiring policies, debt will reach 105% of GDP by the end of this decade, 1 percentage point below historical records set in 1946 after World War II. Interest payments will more than triple under the current law from $263 billion in 2017 to $915 billion estimate in 2028. With the recent tax cut implemented, the budget deficit rose to $779 billion in fiscal year 2018, which is up 17% according to final figures released last week by the U.S. Treasury Department. Rising health care costs, Social Security, and interest costs will be responsible for more than 80% of the nominal spending growth over the next decade. To get control of debt, we must control federal spending. You guys have both said that. Mandatory spending entitlement programs is the largest driver of federal spending, and it exceeds all revenue collected from federal income taxes by a very wide margin. Our nation's entitlement programs seem clearly unsustainable. Serious reforms of these programs appear necessary to avoid bankruptcy and national collapse. Therefore, appears we are well past due for the United States to put into place stronger fiscal rules. Political platforms always call for balanced budgets or are obvious in fiscal responsibility, but very rarely do we get any specifics on how to either move this in the opposite direction or in fact move back towards a more balanced budget. With national debt poised to overtake the entire economy somewhere down the road in the next decade plus, excessive continued spending coupled with a significant tax cut, and then maybe another one, what is your vision of a fiscal plan, and be as specific as you can, that can be implemented and addresses what appears to be our unsustainable debt situation head on? And the first response goes to Denny.
Look, the first thing I learned when I started my own business, there's two sides of the ledger. There's the income and the expense side. There has to be a correlation, or you're not going to be in business very long. If I ran my dairy farm like the United States has run this country, I'd have been out of business a long time ago. You know, you're looking at a $21 trillion debt, and as mentioned, $779 billion last year, approaching $1 trillion debt next year. We can't borrow our way out of debt. In 10 years, our interest payments could be as much as our defense budget, or actually a non-entitlement, the number one expense under the non-entitlement part of our revenue or our budget for the United States. Look, we've got some problems, we have some challenges. There's no question there's fraud and waste that needs to be taken care of. We need to tighten our belt another notch. We need to look at passing legislation like the tax bill that was passed last December that's adding $1.5 trillion to our debt over the next 10 years. When I was Secretary of Agriculture, we had to run a balanced budget. And when we were informed that revenues were not keeping up with our budget, guess what we had to do? We had to re-budget. We had to realign the money that was coming in with the money that we needed to spend. We did it. We kept our programs up and running. We know what it's like to do more with less. And that's what I would certainly encourage the federal government to do, and that would be the platform that I run on in terms of how we deal with our $21 trillion debt against this country.
Thank you, Denny. Dan?
You know, for 8 years, we ran a $10 trillion in excess spending. People in this room voted for President Obama twice, never once talking about or being concerned about the excessive amounts of spending with nothing to show for it over that time frame. And now, the one area that they're trying to point out, which is a very serious issue, and it has been for a long time, but it's amazing that the left and the liberals are now bringing this up. Where were they for 8 years? All right, in the year 2008, our budget debt was $10 trillion. Okay, when President Obama left office, it was $19.5 trillion. Okay, just under a $10 trillion spend. And yet, again, many loyal followers said, you know, he's the hero to many here. We can reduce our spending. We must have a thriving economy. You do not tax your way to prosperity. Taxes are not the solution to covering wild expenses. all right? I mean, that would be like in a business just raising your prices all the time to deal with your excessive spending. It can be done. Listen, when I was at Department of Revenue, we reduced our overhead, our complement, by 7%, about 145 people, all through attrition, and 15% of our costs. That was over a 4-year period. It absolutely can get done, and our services improved. As I said earlier, we were named the most improved Department of Revenue. That's based on taxpayer services. It absolutely can be done. We just need serious people that are focused on growing the private sector, i.e. Republicans, as opposed to the Democrats in Washington who are focused on growing our government. First and foremost, we do have to root out waste, abuse, and fraud. It was done while we were in office. When my opponent was in office, that administration spent $8 billion over an 8-year period. During our 4 years in office, higher than they were before. Our spending went up over a 4-year period, $800 million. A big difference. We rooted out waste, abuse, and fraud, particularly in various departments, what is now DHS, by almost $700 million, strictly through eligibility requirements. You know, we just have to get serious about it. Stop the rhetoric, stop the talk, have people that are going to go to Washington to do a job, not to have a job, and have some results to show for it. There are efficiencies that can be created. We're way behind in informational technologies in the federal government. We should be sharing military expenses with other countries worldwide. And federal government workers right now are making 30 to 40% what their counterparts in the private sector are making. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be paid well, but there are real excesses taking place in our government, folks, and we all know it. We need adults in the room to do something about it.
Thank you. Topic number 7 is healthcare. This question will first go to Dan. A recent Fox News poll indicated Americans' #1 concern in this upcoming midterm election was healthcare, even surpassing their #2 priority, which was the economy. Clearly, the desired goal to amend the ACA, the American Care Act provisions, has so far failed in Congress. In that regard, as congressional candidates, we are aware that your views range from repealing and replacing Obamacare to building on progress you believe was made through ACA. We also know that national philosophies of our two political parties range vastly from single-payer socialistic medicine solutions to free market solutions. Much like many issues coming before Congress, there has been a complete inability to forge a compromise which would amend the Affordable Care Act, something that both Democrats and Republicans both seem to agree needs to be done in some aspects. Under the Affordable Care Act, premiums rose, coverages shrank, and businesses were forced to no longer be able to cover health care for their employees, but rather reduced to figuring out how to mitigate cost out-of-control expenditures. Today, a healthcare system still very driven by the employers is able to offer less coverage at higher costs, coupled with significantly higher deductibles to their employees. The 30-hour work week, which is something some larger companies have to deal with, resulting in higher costs for paid medical benefits for certain employment-sized businesses, has been particularly onerous and in some cases very counterproductive to employees' well-being, as employers were definitely forced to adjust their full-time and part-time employee complements to avoid health care costs. They could not afford to keep their operating costs reasonable and sustainable. In many cases, businesses are not providing health care, as you know, but rather mitigating financial risk for covered employees. Health care access for all, while a lofty goal, has clearly not been achieved. Fewer plan options are available than ever before and continue to shrink in number. The Trump administration recently proposed the opportunity for association health plans, which was intended to provide organizations and associations like chambers of commerce the opportunity to pool and buy health care for employers and their employees in a cost-effective and economical manner, very similar to what many chambers and associations did successfully several decades ago. Unfortunately, 13 state attorney generals, including the Pennsylvania Attorney General, filed suit against the federal government's plan for association health plans, and by the Pennsylvania Insurance Department created an administrative adverse position on the intended benefit of the announcement of these association health plans, thus in Pennsylvania effectively stifling the Trump administration federal initiative to improve the problem of the Affordable Care Act. This election will obviously be of great importance because depending on the House, how the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate realigns following this midterm election will determine the likelihood of Congress's ability to address meaningful health care reform. Where do you stand? Tell the audience, please, where you stand on achieving health care reform. Does the Affordable Care Act need legislative reform? Would you support legislative reform? Will it be part of the collaborative legislative reform initiative if this, in fact, is the people's #1 priority? And in your mind, what specific types of reform would lead to higher quality and more affordable health care for us all? First answer goes to Dan Meuser.
Thank you. Yeah, it is right at the top of the list for the people of the 9th Congressional. Every day I hear someone tell me how their family of 4 is now paying $2,500 a month and their deductibles are $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. So it's more or less, unless something catastrophic occurred, it's almost like not having insurance. So it's a real problem for employers. Employers are doing their very best as we have such low unemployment on keeping employees and keeping people happy and improving their benefits. Those costs come from somewhere. So they're trying to be creative and have quality care, but it will certainly affect wages in the end. So Obamacare really, or the Affordable Care Act, was really a disaster. It had no chance of being successful. It was like trying to defy gravity, the theories behind it. So once again, we need to get serious and deliver for the people rather than for the special interests. We do need to repeal and replace. We do need a program that allows more choices for people. We do need, Bob, as you just talked about, association health plans, so as organizations such as chambers and other buying groups and farmers can be part of association group buying plans. Like, for instance, the State Farm Bureau had 12,000 members in its association group buying program. Along comes Obama, the whole thing disappeared. And you know what? Farmers I talked to thought it was a terrific program. They could call the Farm Bureau, get answers, find out about doctors, and it was completely dissolved because of the brilliance of the Congressional Democrats and the president at the time. So we need more choices. We need to block grant Medicaid to the states. That's very important. The states are far better able to handle. We need to absolutely protect against dropping from pre-existing conditions. That's unconscionable to even think that that would ever exist, that you get sick and your insurance company can either raise its rates, which causes you to drop, or you should leave it. The only people that would ever be for dropping from pre-existing conditions is anyone who doesn't know someone who was in that risk and seen the trauma that they went through just worrying about that. So I would always include pre-existing conditions. And we got to protect Medicare. Look, these things can be done. Medicare is something that as people get into their older years, they look for. It's got to be there for them. It can't be anything at risk. But there are answers here. We also need to go towards generic drugs, right, away from the brand name drugs and all these commercials that drive the brand name drugs. We do need a tort reform. There's still excessive levels of malpractice that exist throughout United States. And we do need Medicare to be able to negotiate directly with the pharmaceutical companies. There are some very simple answers here that will make very significant improvements.
Thank you, Dan. Denny?
We have health care costs that are absolutely out of control. When you look at the costs in the United States, they're twice as much as any developed country in the world. In the United States last year, $3.2 trillion, 17.8% of our GDP went to health care. We've got a spending problem. We've got a lack of efficiency in our health care delivery system. The example that I like to use is Duke Medical Center. They have 900 doctors and they have 1,300 billing clerks. That adds about 15% to your bill right out of the chute because of all the different insurance policies, the co-pays, out-of-pocket expenses, the different Medicare, Medicaid. There needs to be some standardization within the healthcare industry and the insurance industry so that we can eliminate at least that part. Overprescription of tests happens all the time. Local medical center told me about 30% of the tests that are ordered are not necessary. Billions of dollars a year. Drugs. Our pharmaceutical costs have increased 10 times greater than the inflation rate in the last 5 years. Drug companies need to be held accountable. There needs to be more transparency. I'm all about a fair profit, but when you're gouging consumers and people are making a decision between buying their drugs and being able to have enough food to eat or putting heating oil for their furnace, that is a problem. So that's the underlying problem. We're trying to deal with and insure something that is extremely expensive. The costs need to be brought down. The efficiencies need to happen. You know, someone was talking to me the other day about the different hospitals, and they said, you know, all these mergers, this hospital's merging, this hospital's merging, they're buying up these, they get bigger and bigger and bigger, they become more efficient. They can deliver products, they can deliver services because they cut their overhead. Do you think the prices went down when they merged? Even $1? I think it's a good question to ask. I think the system is working against us. I think that some of these institutions are making a lot of money. I think there's plenty of room for a new business plan. I think they need outcome-based medicine. That's a great starting point. Look, I'm not going to get into all the other details. Insurance companies, they're locked in at 15% administrative costs right now. That's probably plenty. And of course, the families. We have right now the pool of people that have health insurance. They're high-risk people. So you're basically insuring high-risk people with a very expensive healthcare delivery system. The insurance is going to be high. We've got to figure this thing out. I agree 100%. It's complicated, but we have to figure it out. It affects everyone, it affects families, and it affects businesses trying to stay in business and make a profit.
Thank you, Denny. Final topic is one that is a favorite of all of ours because it's on the news every morning we wake up. Immigration and the border wall. An important aspect of national security involves immigration laws, border security being obviously stoked by President Trump's campaign to build the wall and enhance border security, and the role of government in enforcing the federal immigration laws. This has been hotly debated and complicated by individual states, which for a long time have been allowing sanctuary city status. This issue has been identified as one of the top 4 issues in the upcoming midterm election and is currently coming into focus as a high priority. The recent caravan of immigrants progressing from Central America across the Mexican border and coming towards the United States, in spite of being offered Mexican asylum and continuing onward, conjures up questions of the intent of this movement and whether this is in fact an initiative of the people of their own due to humanitarian reasons, or has it been somehow politically motivated, charged, and funded. It is clear that there are humanitarian reasons for political asylum. There is also no doubt that both political parties understand the limited resources available to address unchecked illegal immigration and lingering unaddressed situations like DACA, which to date have remained unaddressed through legislation or congressional compromise. However, as the debate rages on, simultaneously border security needs to be maintained and bolstered, and promotion of a functioning legal immigration system that supports economic growth and discourages illegal immigration should be a priority. If borders cannot be secured and immigration continues to be politically debated as election chips of moral humanitarian consciousness, then how do we as Americans protect our country and afford to support the desire of anyone and everyone wishing to come to the United States, as we already struggle with excessive government entitlement spending and the unfunded human service mandates required to support such philosophies? Where do you personally stand on this issue as an American citizen and as a candidate for Congress? Do you support continued federal funding for states and cities not complying with federal immigration law? What should be the U.S. policy on immigration? Why can't immigration policies be enforced according to current U.S. law and applied the same as it was for our ancestors and/or the current law of the land? And if you support an open immigration approach, how do we pay for it? How do we stop real human issues associated with it, such as terrorism, illegal drugs, handling the vetting of individuals entering our country while protecting our national security? And the first answer goes to Denny Wolff.
Immigration, it's an important topic. 3 components. First off, securing our borders. Lots of discussion about that. Do we need to build a wall? How much would it cost? Is Mexico going to pay for it? Looking at information presented by the Border Patrol and DEA, they say a wall today would be like trying to solve a 21st century problem with a 14th century solution. They say that the way that you solve the problem today is new technology, whether it's towers with cameras, ground sensors, no matter what it takes in terms of that type of technology, that could be efficient and effective to make sure that our southern border is secure. Border security is probably the most important part of national security. I agree with that 100%. I don't think the wall's a good investment. I think it's too many billions of dollars, and I think it is solving a 21st century problem with a 14th century solution. Visa problem, we need to overhaul it. It doesn't work. A good friend of mine is Keith Eckel. He used to grow tomatoes up in Clark Summit. He discontinued growing tomatoes because he said you can't depend on it. It's too bureaucratic. You put hundreds of thousands of dollars out for a tomato crop, and you don't know if you're going to have people there to harvest them in the fall. We need to update it. We need to streamline it. We need to make it user-friendly. We need to make it accurate. And we need to look at an H-2C program that allows workers to come in for an extended period of time. That would help different parts of industry that needs extra labor, like the mushroom industry, that's a large part of this 9th Congressional District, or the food processing industry that relies on immigrant help, almost a very large percentage of their workforce. We also have to deal with the 11 or 12 or 13, it's an estimate, million undocumented residents in this country. We can do just like we have for the last 25 years and do nothing. Or we can decide we're going to address the problem. Let me tell you on the list of options, what's not there is deporting 11 or 12 million people. That would be like deporting everybody that lives in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's physically impossible. It's financially impossible. It's not on the list. So we've got to figure out what we need to do to bring that 11, 12 million into the system, whether it's registering them, giving them a temporary visa, doing background checks, vetting them, whether it is a matter of looking at whether they owe taxes, whether they're going to pay a fine. I'm not talking about amnesty or citizenship. I'm talking about bringing them into the system. That also takes care of the sanctuary city problem because now they're registered.
Thank you, Denny. Dan?
By the way, the gentleman you just mentioned, who's a good friend, he said he was extremely disappointed in you and your campaign. You keep invoking him. I thought I'd bring that up. Truth hurts. So we have a big problem. We are very opposite on this issue. Illegal immigration is one of the top issues facing that people in the 9th Congressional care about. We do have many illegals throughout our area. If you ask the local police, they will tell you many of the drugs are coming from Mexico as far as they're concerned. And if you ask the sheriffs virtually in every county that make up the 9th, they feel the same way. We do need border security. We do need to build a wall. The wall is, according to According to the Border Patrol, it is the one area that they do not have to survey, that they do not have to patrol where the walls exist today. They need to cover all the other areas where the electronics and such is being used. My opponent often quotes Chuck Schumer. His number for the wall is $70 million. There's no other, I looked it up, there's no other person or who has come up with a number such as that. The Congressional Budget Office, as well as Homeland Security, said it was closer to 21, maybe $22 billion. It would deliver a return on investment. We cannot fund sanctuary cities. The Congressional Pelosi Democrats are for funding sanctuary cities, and they're also for disbanding ICE. Okay, so pretty much a lawless situation. I am against the lottery system, and we need to end the chain migration because none of that makes any sense. What we do need is a real plan that works for America and also works for the illegals that are here now so they can come out of the shadows. There is a way of setting up for the agricultural community an H2C program that Republicans are spearheading. G.T. Thompson and others that I am, who's vice chair of the Ag Committee, that I'm very much in favor of. We certainly have to be rational, we have to be realistic, but we are also a nation of laws. We cannot go through these undue expenses, and meanwhile we're talking about, some are talking about reducing Social Security and increasing taxes, when meanwhile we won't even secure our borders. So I do believe in the concept of high fences but wide gates, certainly be as compassionate as possible, but be responsible. Again, the adults in the room.
Thank you, Dan.
For DVD and USB copies of tonight's live broadcast with no commercial interruption, please go to matthausenproductions.com/TV or check the link in the description box below. To have us video your event, please call 570-544-3136. Now let's go back to the debate hall.
We're now going to have the two closing statements, again by the coin flip. Dan Meuser will go first, and followed by Denny Wolff, and then I will provide a closing statement with some information that we need to do concerning thanking our host this evening. So, first closing statement goes to candidate Dan Meuser.
I want to thank the Chamber once again very much. It's been a real honor and pleasure getting to know you, Bob, and all the folks of the Chamber, and I just greatly look forward to enhancing those relationships and working together. My opponent's campaign has been entirely about unsubstantiated and undocumented false accusations against my family name and slandering a great Pennsylvania manufacturing company. It's shameful. It's really terrible that where things are. We are committed to focusing on the issues moving forward and making those throughout the 9th District. I think they're already there, but understanding the great contrast that exists and the fact that the direction of our country is at stake. I am running for Congress because I love my country, and I do not believe our government is serving it well enough. I do think there is far too much special interest, which leads to self-interest. I am running because I believe I bring experience to this role, so I can be an effective member of Congress in Washington, working on the issues, communicating them back to people, all of us governing together and doing everything to advance the agenda that is in place, which with the goal of bringing as much prosperity and enable as many businesses to grow as possible. There are great contrasts in this campaign. It's true, we are 180 degrees, we're on polar opposites on every issue, from taxes to regulations to Obamacare to illegal immigration solutions to the idea of draining the swamp. I am for term limits. I am for a balanced budget amendment. I am for bringing order to our government and lawfulness and due process. so as we truly allow the private sector and American families to make this the land of opportunity. There is a lot at stake in this election. It is about the direction that we're going to go. We are either going to continue on the path that we've been on for the last 2 years of advancing an agenda that is working for the vast majority of Americans. We want it to work for all Americans. Or do we back up 2 years, make a hard left, and go down the path that will lead to Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, that will lead to obstruction, and what will lead to attempts at impeachment. They say it, I don't know why we don't hear, but they say it. Even just the other day, Nancy Pelosi made the comment that with that gavel in her hand, she will work on restricting guns and enacting amnesty. I didn't say it, she did. A vote for a Democrat in this congressional race, or any congressional race throughout our country, is a vote for Nancy Pelosi. If they take the House, she will be the next Speaker of the House, so it's up to us.
Thank you, Dan. Closing statement by Denny Wolff, and again, I caution the audience to please give each candidate their due time. Thank you. Denny?
It's been great to be here this evening. I wanted to start my closing remarks by talking about rural values. They're your values, they're my values, they're the values that I grew up with. They're about the close-knit communities in the 9th Congressional District. They are about integrity, they're about accountability, and they're about helping your neighbors when they have a problem. It's where deer hunting is a holiday, where the county fairs are the biggest social event of the year, and where wealth isn't measured by how many cars you have, the kind of Rolex you have. It's more about the people that live around you and the way you care about each other. I am not looking for people to blame. I am looking for problems to solve. There's a big difference there between my opponent and I. I lost track of how many people he blamed tonight. It was Tom Wolff, Kathleen Kane, Chuck Schumer, and about 4 other people that he blamed for the problems of the past. They all happen to be Democrats. I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think my opponent has the temperament to be a member of Congress, especially when I walked up to him at our first debate to shake his hand and he told me to go to hell. I think that says a lot. The people that I talk to in this congressional district, health care and the economy is important to them, but certainly their frustration with the inability of Congress to work together to move important legislation forward is right there. I'm the only candidate in this district running that can do that. I'm the only candidate that will reach my hand across the aisle and say, look, we've got some problems to solve. Let's get to work and take care of business. We're in challenging times right now. There's no question about it. We need people that are willing to work for the people of this district. We need someone who will represent the working class families. We need someone that will move our agenda forward. We went over the whole list here tonight. Health reform, immigration, opioids, infrastructure, the list goes on and on. Do you think they're going to happen without somebody reaching across the aisle and extending their hand
You won't have a
and
chance.
saying that we need to work together to move the agenda forward? I think that's what you need, and I'm the person who will do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Denny. And now for a closing statement on behalf of the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce, our board of directors under the leadership of Chairman Ed Keyworth, my great staff, and our 765 businesses and nonprofit members, excuse me, if I could have your attention, please. I sincerely thank you for your attendance and reinforcing the importance of the process so important to our freedom, electing who will represent us. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce has truly been pleased and honored to host this 9th Congressional District Candidates Forum. We have been blessed to secure the agreement of both these congressional candidates vying to be our representative to attend, and we thank them for their participation and professionalism. We also are very thankful to have a very well-organized and gracious member, our host this evening, the Pottsville Area School District, under the leadership of Superintendent Jess Weibel and his school board, who invited us into this beautiful venue and provided us with all the staff assistance necessary to provide a professional candidates forum. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce has a tremendous working relationship with all our members, but certainly unsurpassed with the relationship with this school district. While the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce provides many programs and services to its businesses and nonprofit members, all of which improve the quality of life for you, our citizens, one of the most important elements that the Chamber offers is government advocacy on the important issues facing us all. In that regard, I want to tell you that both the Government Affairs Committee under the leadership of Chair Bob Williams and the Transportation Committee under the leadership of Chairman Tom Yashinsky and their committee members have invited both these candidates to join them in their committee meetings for candidate platform clarification, education on committee priority positions, and to establish a positive advocacy relationship with each. Both candidates have accepted those invitations and have attended those committees, and therefore the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce has a very solid basis upon which our relationship with our newly elected congressmen will be built. I want to sincerely thank the candidates for their cooperation and their significant interaction with our chamber members over the past year, making sure that our members and our community at large are fully aware of these issues coming before us, the choices they have for representation, and assuring opportunities for their voices to be heard are integral to our chamber's mission. We have now asked the two congressional candidates, should they choose, to proceed to the cafeteria, as some members of the press want to ask them some follow-up questions. We respectfully ask you as the audience to allow them the time to do this in private for a few additional minutes with the media so that the media can quickly complete their coverage for this evening. Please get out and vote on November 6th in our general election. This election is of great significance, as you know, and the importance will impact the direction of our country. Travel home safely. Thank you for attending, and good night.
Thank you for watching. Please be sure to go to madhousenproductions.com/TV to see even more great local programming and get your DVD and USB copies of this broadcast and more. From all of us here at MHP, remember to get out and vote this November.
I'm wounded, empty. I cry out, but no one's listening now. But I can't back down. Third shot, I'm wounded, empty. Can't shout, 'cause no one hears me now. Still I can't back down.